Boom.
Hi, and welcome to Rise with Video, where I sit down with women business leaders who are raising their visibility and impact through the power of video. They'll share their top 5 challenges or tips or ideas for being in front of the camera and sometimes behind the camera. Today I sit down with Lai-DuMone, who is a professional storyteller and speaker, and she's appeared on the stages of TED Talk, as well as facilitating innovative and creative workshops in the workplace. Well, welcome, Vaughn, and so glad to see you here. And more than anything, I look forward to getting together in person when this can actually happen. But thanks for being here over Zoom for this interview. And welcome in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Robyn. I know we've been talking about this for quite some time, so I'm excited to get on here and do this with you.
Well, one of the things I love, like it's even reflected in your background, Vaughn, is there everything about you screams creativity. And it's this lovely, gentle, rolling creativity that I think one of the things that I experience being around you and your creative energy is that I find my own vibe being reflected off of you. So I think it's one of your gifts is that you just inspire and evoke people finding their own creative expression and their own creative voice. And so is there anything you want to say about the workshops that you do with people in terms of helping facilitate that?
Absolutely. And thank you for saying that because, oftentimes, my genius zone really is what people sometimes call it is creativity and curiosity, but it comes so naturally to me that I don't put value into it. So it's very nice for me to hear from you and from other people that it does really bring value to them and is an impact for them. So I've taken those two things in my life, curiosity and creativity, and started a business called worksmart, where I bring creativity into the corporate world through team development and leadership training. So what that might look like is I might do a workshop on communication and trust building and bring in a spoken word artist or bring in a DJ. And I also do a lot of work on creative artifacts. So my creative tool is visual arts. So we may create something that you can take back to work with you as a visual and physical reminder of the work we did that day.
I love that. And we're going to bookend with that because you finish, and we actually allude to this in your very last point. So Vaughn's going to share 5 of her points about raising her visibility as a TED speaker, as a facilitator, which obviously you do that daily in the work that you do with your teams. But I love what you said about that our natural strengths, sometimes we kind of have this feeling of like, isn't everybody like that? Like, doesn't everybody roll in the world with that kind of creativity and curiosity? And
Right.
I love that, you've known or you've recognized that it is part of your calling and it's part of your life's work, as well as a strength that you have.
Absolutely. And it took me quite some time to really combine the two. I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine from college and reflecting on how, he was just saying, I remember you used to bring coloring books to the dorms and get furniture from garage sales and just refinish them in on the front porch. And it's been very interesting to reflect on from someone who knew me back then in college, to see the creative things I used to do just for fun because it was just so much a part of me, to be able to now take that and bring it into the work I do.
Isn't that cool? Because I know for some people, when they do that dance or that weaving, sometimes it kills the passion of the hobby or the creative outlet, and then it becomes the job rather than the passion. And for you, you've managed to keep them kind of in a cool combined lane.
Absolutely. I think part of that is because it's always different, right? There's part of it, the things, it would be amazing if I could just can some workshops and say, here's exactly what I sell out there to people. But what's great about the work I do and what's exciting for me is that every time I work with a company, an individual, a team, it's always about co-creating it. So it's a collaboration to come up with something that's going to be most meaningful for that team.
I love that because then you bring your unique gifts to it, but it becomes their, it's not like they hired you and once you're gone, they can't do any of the skills themselves. It's like you've facilitated their learning and their, the sparking of their creativity and curiosity, which is exactly what I was talking about being in your presence. It's like there's an evoking that you have about you. So.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And let's dig into some of the hot tips that you have because aside from the work that you do in corporations and with teams, you have quite an accomplished career on the stage. You've been a keynote speaker and you've been on TED. And one of the things I loved about one of your hot tips came from your experience of being a TED speaker, which I'd love to hear more about. And the idea of having a strategy or a through line of your speech or ultimately your video brand. So do you want to get started with that, Van?
Absolutely. So when I wrote my TEDx talk, or when I came to doing a TEDx talk, it was around a very personal story in my life, around my family being refugees in the United States, and from there, this chance meeting with my mom and a Hollywood movie star at this refugee integration center that led to the manicure industry in the United States. So that was my story. What I learned in writing this TEDx talk is that yes, your story matters in it, but really what matters is a through line. Like, what do you want to say that's going to impact the audience? And then the story is part of that, right? Then you weave your story, you weave quotes, you weave quotes from books into it and ideas into it, but you have to have a through line. Like your through line is really like what is going to impact the audience. And something else I learned in that is there are going to be some parts of your story that you love that you're going to have to cut out. Because again, if it's not for the audience and you just happen to love it, it's not the right thing to put in there. And that was one of the most, that was the hardest part, right? Yeah.
I feel you. It is hard. So editing is one of the biggest. It's harder to say less, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I realized in doing so that that's how you make the most impact. And that's how you get people to hear what you have to say.
So what was the through line? Do you remember the actual, sort of theme or sentence of your speech? Because I'll put it in the show notes below so that people can check out your TED Talk. It's fabulous.
Yes. Oh, thank you. So my through line was this idea that it can impact anyone, is the idea that to create possibilities for yourself and for others, you follow your curiosity, ask what if, and take small steps. So that was the message I wanted people to leave with. And then again, the story of like my mom's story, other stories I told, books I incorporated into it, all fed into that through line.
And it did. And the thing I love most about it is that, with some talks, it feels somewhat like a presentation, whereas yours just felt like a conversation, like you were just opening the front door and, including the viewer, the audience in your experience of your family. And I think that's a real gift, a truly gifted speaker is somebody who feels like they're just having a one-to-one with the audience. Yeah. That must have been nerve-wracking though. Tell me about your experience, like doing your TED Talk.
Absolutely. So I will tell you, the reason why it looked like that is because I memorized it and memorized it again and memorized it again until I could say it in my sleep. And once I had that confidence, then I could get on stage and add my own elements to it, right? So for me, I mean, other people might do it differently, but for me, I really had to know that it was memorized and I could say it word for word before I could add my own personality and characteristics to it. As far as the experience of it, I was completely nervous, right? I got to stand, and honestly, that TEDx talk, people keep saying like you did it backwards. My TEDx talk was my first public speaking engagement. Most people lead up to a TEDx. I started a TEDx and went from there.
The high diving board into the deep end.
That's right. So a couple of things, it is nerve-wracking, right? You're standing in front of people, no notes, nothing, just lights in front of you and whatever you could remember of your speech. I fortunately remembered all of it because again, I spent weeks doing nothing but memorizing it. My family ate frozen food for those weeks. I pretty much did nothing else besides memorize that speech over and over and over again. The other thing to know, and again, this is specifically for TEDx talks, is this idea of advocating for yourself as a speaker. So for example, there's a part of my speech that I talk about this organization that I do nonprofit work for called the Honor Foundation. And when I described it during my talk, there were about 2 or 3 words I said that were not on point with exactly what they do. So I asked afterwards, I just went up to the producers of the TEDx and said, I'd really like to record that over. And they said yes. And then even afterwards, when they sent me the edited copy of my talk, I said, I'd like to take a stab at editing myself or having someone I know edit it. And they said yes to that too.
Good for you. That's
Yeah.
amazing, because then you grabbed some of the control over the production, and they didn't have to let you. So
Right.
good for you for asking for what you want. And especially when you know it's a TED Talk and it's going to be out there for a while, it's going to be a calling card for you. And you don't want to have stuff on there that you're like, oh, that's a wrong fact. Or
Oh yeah,
I love it that you
absolutely.
did that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
And it's interesting. I don't know if this is genderizing things, but I think it's less common for women to ask for those kinds of things. You know what a TED Talk production is like, and I know what it's like behind the scenes. Like, we are moving and there's not a
Mhm.
lot of time for retakes, and you're asking a bit when you say, "Can we do it again?" And
Yes.
and so that you found your message important enough, and the gravity of it, of being shared again. That's really why I love it. It's like you stood for yourself.
Absolutely. And I think that's, it's interesting because I think um, to me, it wasn't me standing up for myself really. It was like that whole process of that through line, like following my curiosity. It's like, what if I could do it again? Right? Like, what if I could
Oh,
do it
cool.
again? And then taking the small step of like just walking up to them and asking them, do you think I can do this again? Right? What if they would let me edit it? So it's interesting because that really what it is. It's me standing up for myself, advocating for myself. But in my mind, it was just following that through line of following my curiosity, ask what if, and take small steps.
Oh, I love the extra little nuance of that, because I was kind of, from a, you know, Delta Dawn woman hear me roar perspective, but
Right?
you were just sort of like a, what if? What
Yeah,
if? That's
absolutely.
cool.
Yes.
Well, and the preparation that you did going into the TED Talk is a little bit counterintuitive to the next one that you say. But when you're thinking about a major speech or a major presentation versus doing more off the cuff videos and more just social media kinds of things, your second
Mhm.
tip is to not worry about making things overproduced and not getting hung up on having to be perfect, or and also the idea of repurposing your videos. So do
Oh
you want
yeah.
to talk a little bit about that
Yes.
tip, Vaughn?
Yes, absolutely. So I think I was given the advice to start making myself more visible through video a good 2.5 years ago. And I probably started maybe a year ago, really putting myself out there on video. And a lot of that was because, like, well, I don't have the right lighting. I don't have the right camera. What am I going to say? How do I look? And what I realized in finally putting myself out there is just start. And guess what? It's not going to be pretty at first. I tell you, my first 30-second clip probably took me 4.5 hours to make because I kept editing myself. And I realized, like, the less I edited myself and the more natural I came across, the more responses I would get from it. And the other aspect of that too is just the idea that if you are someone who already does a lot of facilitation, you are out there having things recorded, advocate for yourself, either take video yourself or ask for that video footage. And then what you can do is repurpose it, make small clips out of that. So you're actually not creating anything, you're just repurposing.
And that's one of the things that I'm working with some companies doing, especially since the pandemic, is incorporating video into their culture. So basically creating a video centric culture, and the whole idea of videotaping meetings, videotaping any presentations. And
Right.
that way, you've just got social media content out the yin yang. So, a lot of people get worried about how to come up with content strategy. They hire people to do all of their content. And all you have to do is take a video and know where to put it and have a strategy around it. So, such a good point
Absolutely.
about that. And I love, you've got some great examples of that on your LinkedIn videos. You're just in your desk. They look gorgeous. So it doesn't look
Thank
like it's
you.
underproduced. I think there's kind of a sweet spot in the middle there where you want it to look reflective of your brand. You don't want it to look, really bad lighting and really bad sound and, like bedhead.
Right.
There's
That's
like,
true.
but to not freak ourselves out in terms of getting stuff out the door. I so agree.
Absolutely. Like, buy yourself a little ring light. I often record just on Zoom here, like this. And um and then use the Zoom filter.
You do what?
Use a Zoom filter.
Yeah,
Could you
right?
use that?
Or
Yeah,
the
use your Zoom
Instagram filter I just
Instagram
discovered.
filter. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And just put something, just start putting things out there. And the less, what I realized in terms of like when we talk about like not overproduce, I feel like the less scripted it is, the more you're going to resonate and relate to people.
Yeah. Especially for social media posts, it's
Right.
that it's sort of like what we were talking about with the TED Talk, is that it's the idea of being conversational with people rather than being presented to. So
Yes.
yeah, if you can do that in social media, it's hard though. Like, for the average person who isn't super comfortable on video and hasn't done a lot of it, I love your point about you just have to get started and then it'll start to feel more natural. But it's at the very beginning, I always liken it to, you turn on the tap and it's when if it hasn't been running for a while, the water's brown and murky and it
Right.
spits a little and then, it gets its mojo. So think of the speaking
Absolutely.
like that as well, that you'll get one take that takes 4 hours because you can't get that first
Yeah,
sentence right. But then once you're past
that's
the
right.
first sentence, it's like you're flying. So, well, this is funny because it's a great segue to your third point, which is don't let your ego get in the way. And I love your take on it because it's, the ego in the sense of the, playing small. So how's that
Absolutely.
affected your rise?
Well, I think it plays into the point we just talked about before, is the idea that, I'm naturally someone who just cares a lot about what other people think of me. I have always been that way. As a child, I was that way, and all through adulthood, I've been that way, still am. But to kind of put that aside and be like, I have information I want to share, I need to share, and it has positive impact for people. So I just want to get it out there. So focus on your impact, not your ego, right? Because my ego will tell me I'm not putting anything out there. Who are you to, right?
Yeah.
The idea of focusing on the impact you're about to make by putting something out there versus, oh, my ego is telling me that I'm like, why should I be doing this? Who am I to make videos? Who am I to tell people how to be creative? Whatever that might be, that voice in your head, that negative voice in your head. So just put that aside and think about what's the impact I can make when I put this out there, and move from there.
I think having a picture of the person who needs you the most in your brain just before you're about to go on camera and just bringing that into your heart. That's what I've done. I've actually,
That's a
when I
great
was shooting
idea.
my personal branding boot camp, I had photos of my clients
Ah,
behind the camera, and
that's
it
so
helped
great, so
land
smart.
me and, realize that, yeah, I'm really speaking to real people. It's not this weird black hole that I'm speaking to. It's like,
Yes.
real live people.
Yeah. And similar to what we were talking about, the TEDx talk is like thinking all about about your audience, right? Yes, you're the one on video, you're the one presenting, but it's not about you, it's about your audience.
Yeah, and we talked about this one in our prep talk about sort of the idea of beginning with the end in mind, which really leads to what we were talking about throughline. How do you want people to leave the building after you've spoken or after you've facilitated a workshop? What's the transformation that
Yeah,
is going to happen as a result of people being in your workshop or spending time with you? And,
absolutely.
again, I think that's if creativity and curiosity is at the base of all that, nothing bad can happen. That's for sure. Well, and, it's like I love that we're dancing on these because this is another piece of it is owning this is your fourth tip, is own
Mhm.
your own creative corner and own your uniqueness and your own gift because it does kind of mitigate that voice that wants you to play small if you're really on
Mhm.
the flip side owning who you are and your unique contribution. So how's that played out for you?
Well, I remember listening to a podcast, I think it was Elizabeth Gilbert, talking about this idea. I think she was talking to Brene Brown about it on her podcast. This idea that, there's not really a lot of new ideas out there, right? There's not a lot of new. Like if you think about, if you think about Brene Brown talking about vulnerability, or Simon Sinek talking about what's your why, these aren't new concepts, right? But because of who they are and how they say it, some people could hear it better from them, and some people could only hear it from them and they had never heard it before. And that's how I look at my work now, because I know tons of people who do the work similar to what I do, bring creativity in the workshop into the workplace in one way or another. So I could look at that and say, oh, someone else was already doing it, so why should I? Or I can look at it and say, more people need to be doing that, because there's still millions of people out there who haven't heard it and can only hear it in the way I'm saying it. So
exactly,
really recognizing that your voice does matter. You may have similar message as someone else, but there are literally, and I 100% believe there are literally people who have heard it, and they haven't really embodied it, but maybe they need to hear it from you in order to really embody it.
and it's, you didn't hear what I said about you in the introduction, but being a consummate storyteller, you mentioned Brene Brown and Simon Sinek. And I include you in that group because you are you convey your messages through very well-crafted personal stories, but they're overarching stories. And you know, I think that's what actually teaches people. If they're listening to something and they're engaged in a well-told story, then it could be that moment that they hear something and it lands and it sticks.
Right.
And then you're that person's teacher of that piece.
And I think that's why the work I do is so sticky in terms of people retain it, is because through creativity, through play, you're tapping into an emotion. And that's what storytelling does too. So we can tap into people's emotions around something, there it's going to resonate better than just saying, here's what you do, A, B, C, and D.
Yeah, you know, it's is it the limbic brain or the, yeah, I don't even want to get into the science of it, but that idea that, and I think that's when we actually cement the learning. You know, it's funny because I've looked at your website and we've talked about the creativity, and you know, people, you know, the people, sometimes people will see creative things like colors and stuff to play with and tactile kinds of things, and they'll kind of roll their eyes. And I was one of those when I took a design thinking, and I was like, we're not going to spend a whole day doing pipe cleaners, are we? And at the end of it, you know, I have never forgotten the pieces of that workshop, because I let that left brain have to take notes, go, and I was fully experiencing the design thinking part of the workshop, and it stuck. So
yes, and it keeps you present.
And you know, it's interesting because it's another good segue into the last piece, which is you're talking about authenticity and being yourself. And you know, I work with a lot of people about that on camera, and it's kind of easier said than done. So how have you done that? You know, knowing that your TED Talk was going to be seen by, you know, not only the people in the audience, but then the, you know, people beyond. How do you get past those nerves and be yourself being that visible?
Sure. So I think it's number one, getting past nerves, and then also getting past the idea of what you think you should be, right? If you're watching other people's videos and you see the way other people present. Yes, I think that's really important to take a look at what other people are presenting and see how they present, but to be authentic to yourself and your natural characteristics. So for me to sit here, if I had tons of makeup on, if I was in heels, if I was very serious, because you know that's what I thought I should be, it would come off as very inauthentic. So I found something, actually one of my clients had told me about it. She said, check out the VIA character strength survey. So it's values in action. I think we're going to post something in the show notes about this. So everyone can take it.
Show notes below.
Exactly. So it's a survey that you can take, and it comes up with your 5 top character strengths. My top 2 happen to be curiosity and creativity. So,
oh, surprise.
Surprise, right? So really for me is I use that now in terms of when I'm walking into a situation where I'm a little nervous, I'm unsure, I look at those characteristics, say, okay, I'm going to walk in this room with curiosity and creativity, because anxiety isn't part of my top 5, right? Nervousness isn't a part of my top 5. So what characteristics I want to walk in with? The other thing I've done, speaking of creative artifacts, is I got little rocks. I've done this for a workshop too, where I sent people rocks and markers and have them do the VIA character strengths assessment and write down their top 5 character strengths, one on each rock. And I said, sit them on your desk. So again, when you are, whether it's video or walking into a meeting that you're nervous about, look at your rocks and say, what characteristic am I going to walk into this meeting with? What characteristic am I going to embody when I make this video? And again, it's just a way to anchor back into those character strengths, because And it's interesting too to have those visual clues, because if I didn't have them, I may not remember them. I may not remember, like, okay, here I go, I'm gonna bring in curiosity to this. Here I go, I'm gonna bring in my creativity or my humor to this. I just may come in nervous, but having those physical anchors really helps.
I love it because, you said it's a visual, but it's almost it's also a kinesthetic piece because,
Yeah,
wrapping my hand around a rock, there's something grounding about that. My hands shake when I get really, really nervous. I think it's just a lot of energy running through my body. But if I actually, held a rock in each hand, I'll bet you that would really help to just, hold some of that
ground you.
extra anxious energy. What a great idea. I love
Absolutely.
that idea of having your top 5 strengths and then just calling or evoking that strength when,
Yep.
maybe it's the one you need right at that
Yeah.
moment.
And because they are your natural strengths, it doesn't take much to evoke it, right? It comes very naturally to you. So yeah,
That's a
just
good
it's almost like
point.
it can come naturally, but you also need those reminders to, like, okay, this is who I am, and this is what I'm going to bring to this conversation.
What a really lovely finish to that because, for somebody who, I'll be honest, I've gone through life, I've kind of got a little bit of that Norwegian work ethic of like, it's got to be hard to be good. And, more than anything, this last couple of years, our mutual friend, Katie, we always go, Katie Branter, where's the easy button? And I actually have one. And so, it was easy. And just the way that you describe that is there's a description almost of ease of this is who I am. So I'm just going to hold my being in this rock
Mhm.
and be that. And it could be that simple. You don't have to do a marathon in order to be that, do you? That's
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. There's
lovely.
nothing else you need to do. Right. Like that's the beauty of character strengths. Like there's nothing else you need to do to embody that. You just have to remember it.
So, Vaughn, we've talked about the work that you do out in the workplace. How would people work with you if there was somebody listening to this who, I love the idea of being curious, creative, and having ease. That's another quality that I experience. There's just kind of
Uh,
you're from California. Maybe there's just kind of like that
right.
California vibe, but there's just a chill, yeah, not a lack of polish and professionalism, but just a really relaxed vibe around you. So,
Yeah.
how would people work with you and get some of that in their life?
Absolutely. So I work with mostly with teams and organizations to do leadership training, team development. So you can always schedule a discovery call with me. We'll put in a link for the discovery call. And then also I ask people to join my newsletter. It's called Curious About Creativity. It's a monthly newsletter. And I'm always offering tips on how to just bring creativity into your life individually. So those are two ways. I'm also currently working on a digital course around creative problem solving and creative innovation so that people can access my work individually versus having to, unless if you happen to be a team leader, you can certainly bring me in. But if you're not, like, how do you access my work? So I am working on some digital courses that people can use individually. But the newsletter, I'm always just giving away information because I really see the impact of what I'm doing. And how creativity, even just a small dose of creativity in people's lives, can really make a big positive difference.
And I love that you're doing that. One of the things I say in working with some of the leaders that I work with that is that if there's something that you're saying to your teams or to your people over and over and over again, and it would be of service to them to be able to hear it when you're not there, then put it on video and make it a course. And I love that you've done that. It's, you're serving the people that you've worked with. And especially in this time of, sort of the post-pandemic when we realized that we could really help the world a little bit by making ourselves a little bit more accessible by not having to be in the
Yeah.
same room all the time and making that easy for people. So yay you for thinking that through. So
That's
Vaughn, is there
another
anything
thing. That's
else?
another thing that's like I've been thinking about for about 2 years. I'm like, okay, I'm really gonna do it now. I've nailed videos. Now I'm gonna move on to digital courses.
And you've also beta tested it out in the world, and so you have a
Right.
pretty good sense of what people are wanting or needing. And so yeah, that is really the time to pull the trigger and do it. And one of the things I do love about you too is that you do it. You're a make stuff happen kind of gal. So
Yes.
is there anything else you want
It's
to say to
it's the
finish off our
Norwegian
time?
work ethic.
What's that? The Norwegian work ethic?
Yeah.
The Vietnamese work ethic, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I don't mean to be talking over you. It's this weird delay thing, but is there anything else that you want to say to finish off our interview, Vaughn?
Well, I just feel like everyone, I mean, if there's one thing I'd like to say is just like this idea of following your curiosity, right? Ask what if, take small steps. I take that from my TEDx talk, but I really feel like if we're going to create change in the world, in our lives and other people's lives, and create possibilities for ourselves and for others, those are easy steps to take to make some changes.
And it's such a wonderful thing because that was your very first tip, is have a through line. And that has been your through line throughout. And it's pretty easy to stay consistent and on brand and authentic. And, you know, doing all of the things that you offered in terms of your 5 tips in this video, and to really be yourself. And that's more than anything what I think we're all about, you know, is trying to find ourselves, be ourselves, and then share ourselves and express ourselves. So great way to finish. Thank you so much, Vaughn. It was great to have you here, and thanks for your wisdom. I can't wait to see you in person. I hope it's very, very soon.
Soon, I hope. Yes, I'd love to make it up there.
Yeah, it's time.
Yes,
Borders are opening. Okay,
yes,
come
thank
on
you for
up.
having me.
Okay, thanks for being here, Vaughn, and we'll talk soon. Thanks everyone else for being here.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for being here and staying right to the end of this episode of Rise with Video. Keep in mind, I'm always looking to work with committed and conscious women business leaders to help them create quality video brands. So if that's you, check out the link in the show notes and let's book a virtual coffee. You can catch other episodes on our YouTube channel, Rise with Video. And if you like this video, hit like and share it with your friends. Again, thanks for being here, and we'll catch you in the next episode of Rise with Video.